Professor Dr. Maximilian Schell mit seiner charmanten Begleitung Iva.
When the name Maximilian Schell is mentioned, many film lovers immediately think of a powerful presence on screen, an actor capable of delivering performances filled with intensity, intelligence, and emotional depth. For decades, Schell stood among the most respected figures in international cinema, admired not only for his acting but also for his work as a director, writer, and cultural commentator. Yet, like many remarkable lives in Hollywood and European cinema, the story behind his success contained layers of personal struggle, reflection, and, according to those closest to him, a lingering regret that followed him into his later years. Born in 1930 in Vienna, Austria, Schell grew up in a family surrounded by art and creativity. His father was a writer and poet, while his mother was an actress, meaning that storytelling and performance were woven into the very fabric of his childhood. However, the peaceful cultural environment of his early years was soon disrupted by the rising tension in Europe during the years leading up to the Second World War. When Nazi influence began spreading across Austria, the Schell family, who opposed the regime, made the difficult decision to leave their homeland and relocate to Switzerland. This early experience of displacement would shape Schell's worldview in profound ways. The sense of witnessing history unfold around him, along with the moral questions raised by the war, would later influence many of the roles he chose as an actor. His performances often carried a seriousness that suggested he understood the complexities of human behavior far beyond the script itself. After studying at the University of Zurich and briefly considering careers in journalism and music, Schell eventually followed the artistic path that seemed destined for him. His acting career began on stage in Europe, where he quickly earned recognition for his powerful voice and commanding presence. But it was Hollywood that would ultimately bring him international fame. His breakthrough came with a 1961 film Judgment at Nuremberg, where he portrayed a defense attorney representing German judges accused of crimes during the Nazi era. The role demanded emotional complexity and moral ambiguity, and Schell delivered performance that captivated audiences and critics alike. For his work in the film, he won the Academy Award for Best Actor, instantly elevating him to global stardom. Yet success never seemed to define Schell entirely. While many actors might have embraced the glamour of Hollywood and pursued a steady stream of high-profile roles, Schell often followed a different path. He appeared in both American and European productions, frequently choosing projects that explored historical or philosophical themes. Films such as The Odessa File and A Bridge Too Far demonstrated his ability to bring gravity and authenticity to complex historical narratives. Beyond acting, Schell also directed several films and documentaries, including projects that reflected his deep interest in art, culture, and memory. One of his most personal works focused on his sister, Maria Schell, who had also achieved great fame in European cinema. The documentary offered a deeply emotional portrait of their relationship, revealing the bonds and struggles that existed within their creative family. Despite his many achievements, Schell's personal life was often filled with introspection and quiet contemplation. Friends and colleagues described him as thoughtful, philosophical, and occasionally restless, a man constantly searching for meaning beyond the spotlight. While he enjoyed recognition and respect within the film industry, he also seemed aware that fame alone could never fully satisfy the deeper questions that occupied his mind. In his later years, as Schell approached his 90s, those closest to him began reflecting on the remarkable journey he had lived. Family members spoke about the memories he cherished most, his childhood experiences in Europe, his early theater days, and the relationships that shaped his life both on and off the screen. Yet within those reflections, they also revealed something more personal, a sense that Schell sometimes wished he had spent more time focusing on the people closest to him rather than constantly pursuing artistic ambition. Like many creative figures, Schell had dedicated enormous energy to his craft. Acting, directing, and storytelling had been central to his identity for decades. While that dedication brought him worldwide acclaim, it also meant long periods away from family, friends, and the quieter moments that often define a fulfilling life. According to relatives who spoke about his final years, Schell occasionally expressed regret that the pace of his career had left less room for those personal connections. This reflection did not erase the pride he felt in his accomplishments. Schell remained deeply grateful for the opportunities he had experienced and the roles that allowed him to explore humanity's most complex themes. However, as he looked back on his life, he seemed increasingly aware that success in art does not always replace the value of time shared with loved ones. When Maximilian Schell passed away in 2014, tributes poured in from around the world. Filmmakers, actors, and critics remembered him as one of the most thoughtful performers of his generation, a man whose work carried both intellectual depth and emotional power. Yet beyond the awards and accolades, the stories shared by his family offered a glimpse of the human being behind the legendary career. His journey reminds us that even the most accomplished lives can contain moments of reflection and unfinished questions. For Schell, the pursuit of artistic excellence defined much of his path, but in the quiet moments of his later years, he seemed to recognize that the greatest achievements in life are not always measured by applause or recognition. Instead, they are often found in the relationships we nurture, the time we share with others, and the memories we create away from the spotlight. And in that sense, the story of Maximilian Schell is not only about cinema history, it is also a deeply human story about ambition, reflection, and the lessons that emerge when a remarkable life is viewed through the lens of time. That as the years pass and the legacy of Maximilian Schell continued to be discussed among film historians and admirers, a clearer picture of the man behind the powerful performances began to emerge. While audiences around the world remembered him for his commanding presence on screen, those closest to him often described a deeply reflective individual who constantly questioned the meaning of success, art, and personal fulfillment. In many ways, Schell's life seemed to mirror the characters he portrayed, complex individuals navigating moral dilemmas, searching for purpose in a world that rarely offered simple answers. Throughout the 1960s and 1970s, Schell's career flourished as he moved between Hollywood productions and European cinema with remarkable ease. After the enormous acclaim he received for his role in Judgment at Nuremberg, producers recognized that he possessed a rare ability to bring intellectual depth to dramatic roles. Rather than portraying heroes in a traditional sense, Schell often chose characters who embodied moral conflict or historical significance. These performances allowed him to explore themes that had fascinated him since childhood, questions about justice, responsibility, and the consequences of political power. Yet fame, as Schell would later acknowledge, carried its own set of complexities. While his work opened doors to prestigious projects and international recognition, it also demanded relentless dedication. Film sets took him across continents, separating him from family for extended periods. Interviews, press tours, and creative commitments filled his schedule year after year. To the outside world, his life appeared glamorous and successful. But privately, Schell sometimes wrestled with the quiet cost of a career that required constant motion. His connection to his sister, Maria Schell, remained one of the most significant relationships in his life. Maria had also become a major star in European cinema during the 1950s, and the siblings shared a bond rooted in their artistic upbringing. When Maximilian later directed a documentary about her life and career, the project revealed not only his admiration for her talent, but also the emotional depth of their relationship. Through that film, audiences saw a more personal side of Schell, one that valued family history and the memories they had built together through decades of creative work. Still, the pressures of the entertainment industry could be difficult to escape. As Schell moved into later stages of his career, he began speaking more openly about the emotional challenges that accompany long-term success. Unlike some actors who thrive in the spotlight, Schell often approached fame with a certain philosophical distance. He viewed acting not as a path to celebrity, but as a tool for exploring human truth. This perspective sometimes made him appear reserved or introspective during interviews, but it also reinforced his reputation as one of the most intellectually engaged performers of his era. In the final decades of his life, Schell gradually stepped back from the demanding pace of international filmmaking. Although he continued appearing in select projects, he spent more time reflecting on his experiences and revisiting the memories that had shaped his journey. Family members later recalled how these years were filled with conversations about the past, stories from his childhood in Vienna, recollections of early theater productions, and reflections on the many artists he had encountered throughout his long career. During these quiet moments of reflection, Schell sometimes spoke about the choices he had made along the way. Like many creative individuals, he had pursued his craft with relentless determination, always striving to deepen his understanding of storytelling and performance. That dedication had earned him admiration across the film world, yet it also meant that personal sacrifices were inevitable. According to those closest to him, Schell occasionally wondered whether he might have balanced his professional ambitions differently if he had the chance to live those years again. These reflections did not diminish his pride in the work he had accomplished. Films such as The Odessa File and A Bridge Too Far remained important milestones in his career, demonstrating the range and seriousness that defined his acting style. What Schell seemed to question instead was the pace of a life spent constantly moving from project to project, city to city, role to role. The deeper realization, his family suggested, was that artistic achievement and personal fulfillment are not always the same thing. When Schell eventually passed away in 2014, tributes from across the world described him as one of the most thoughtful actors of his generation. Directors praised his dedication to authenticity, fellow performers remembered his generosity on set, and critics celebrated the emotional intelligence he brought to every role. Yet the reflections shared by his family added another dimension to that legacy. They revealed a man who never stopped examining his own life, someone who understood that even the most successful career can leave unanswered questions behind. In many ways, the story of Maximilian Schell serves as a reminder that greatness often comes with complexity. The same passion that drives individuals to achieve remarkable success can also lead them to overlook the quieter moments that give life balance. Schell's reflections in his later years suggest that he understood this truth deeply, recognizing that the relationships we nurture and the time we share with loved ones may ultimately matter more than the applause that echoes long after performance ends. For audiences who continue to watch his films today, Schell's performances still carry the same intensity and intellectual power that first captivated viewers decades ago. But beyond the screen, his story offers something even more profound, a glimpse into the inner world of an artist who spent his life exploring the human condition, only to realize that the most important lessons often appear when we pause long enough to reflect on the path we have taken today as the final chapters of Maximilian Schell's life unfolded. The legendary actor appeared increasingly reflective about the extraordinary journey he had lived. For decades, audiences had seen him as a commanding performer whose intelligence and emotional depth elevated every role he touched. Yet behind the public admiration was a man quietly examining the path that had taken him from a war-shadowed childhood in Europe to the heights of international cinema. In conversations with family and close friends during his later years, Schell often looked back not only on his achievements but also on the choices that had shaped his life in ways he had not fully understood at the time. Those who knew him best described his final years as a period of contemplation. While his career had been filled with remarkable accomplishments, an Academy Award, numerous acclaimed performances, and recognition across multiple continents, Schell seemed more interested in discussing the deeper meaning of those experiences rather than celebrating the accolades themselves. The success he achieved after his unforgettable performance in Judgment at Nuremberg had opened doors that few actors could even imagine, yet he increasingly spoke about how fame can sometimes obscure the simpler, more personal aspects of life. Family members later recalled how Schell often shared memories of the early years before fame entered the picture. He spoke fondly of growing up in an artistic household, where discussions about literature, music, and theater filled the air. His mother had been an actress, and his father a writer, creating an environment where creativity felt natural and inevitable. Yet the looming presence of political turmoil in Europe forced the family to leave their home and settle in Switzerland during the rise of the Nazi regime. That early experience of displacement left a lasting mark on Schell, shaping his understanding of history, morality, and the responsibility artists carry when telling stories about the human condition. These themes would later become central to many of the roles he chose. Schell often gravitated toward characters wrestling with ethical dilemmas or historical consequences, bringing intensity and authenticity to stories that demanded emotional depth. Films such as The Odessa File and A Bridge Too Far allowed him to explore the lingering questions of war, justice, and accountability, subjects that had fascinated him since childhood. Through these performances, Schell demonstrated an ability to transform complex historical themes into deeply human experiences on screen. But as the years passed and the pace of his career gradually slowed, Schell began to reflect more openly on the sacrifices that accompanied his success. Acting had taken him across continents, often requiring long periods away from home. Film productions demanded weeks or months of intense focus, leaving little time for the quieter moments that define everyday life. While he remained proud of the work he had accomplished, those closest to him noticed that he sometimes wondered whether the relentless pursuit of artistic achievement had come at a personal cost. One relationship that remained especially meaningful throughout his life was his bond with his sister, Maria Schell. Both siblings had built distinguished acting careers, and their shared experiences in the film industry created a connection that endured through decades of change. Maximilian later directed a documentary exploring Maria's life and career, a project that revealed his deep admiration for her talent as well as the emotional closeness they shared. Through that film, audiences glimpsed a more intimate side of Schell, one that valued family and memory just as much as artistic accomplishment, that in the final stage of his life, those memories seemed to grow even more important to him. Conversations with relatives often revolved around moments that had nothing to do with film sets or award ceremonies. Instead, Schell spoke about childhood adventures, family gatherings, and the friendships that had sustained him through both triumphs and challenges. According to family members, it was during these reflections that he sometimes expressed his greatest regret, that he wished he had devoted more time to nurturing personal relationships rather than constantly chasing the next artistic project. This realization did not diminish the remarkable legacy he left behind. Schell remained deeply respected within the film world, admired for the intellectual seriousness and emotional authenticity he brought to every performance. Directors often praised his dedication to exploring the deeper meaning behind each role, while fellow actors remembered him as a thoughtful collaborator who treated storytelling as a profound responsibility. Yet the reflections shared by his family offer a poignant reminder that even the most celebrated lives can carry moments of quiet longing. Schell's story illustrates how success, no matter how impressive, cannot replace the simple connections that give life its true meaning. In acknowledging this truth during his later years, he revealed a level of honesty and humility that made his legacy even more compelling. When Maximilian Schell passed away in 2014, the film industry lost one of its most thoughtful and complex performers. But beyond the tributes from critics and colleagues, the reflections from his family painted a fuller portrait of the man behind the legend. They spoke not only of the actor who captivated audiences, but also of the human being who spent his final years looking back on a life filled with both extraordinary accomplishments and deeply personal realizations that in the end, the story of Maximilian Schell is about more than cinematic success. It is about the universal journey of searching for meaning, balancing ambition with personal connection, and recognizing, sometimes only in the quiet moments near the end of life, that the greatest achievements are often measured not by awards or applause, but by the relationships we cherish and the memories we leave behind. As the story of Maximilian Schell continued to unfold through the memories of those who knew him best, it became clear that his life was defined not only by artistic brilliance, but also by a deep sense of introspection. Schell had always been known as a thinker, someone who approached acting as more than simply performing lines on a page. For him, every role represented an opportunity to explore the deeper truths of human nature, and that philosophy guided nearly every decision he made throughout his remarkable career. Yet in his final years, it was not the complexity of his characters that occupied his thoughts most often. It was the complexity of his own live friends who visited him during his later years often described conversations that drifted away from film sets and awards toward broader reflections about time, purpose, and the choices that shape a person's life. Schell had lived through some of the most dramatic moments of the 20th century, from the turmoil of wartime Europe to the rapid transformation of international cinema. These experiences had given him perspective that few actors could claim, and he often spoke about how witnessing history firsthand had influenced the types of stories he felt compelled to tell on screen. His performance in Judgment at Nuremberg remained one of the clearest examples of that commitment. The film confronted the moral aftermath of the Second World War and forced audiences to confront uncomfortable truths about justice and responsibility. Schell's portrayal of the defense attorney was powerful precisely because he refused to present the character as purely heroic or villainous. Instead, he explored the uncomfortable gray areas